All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Outspoken. I'm Dan Sileo. What an absolute insane week of sports. The NBA finals are off the charts. NHL as well. You got Carolina with a 3-2 lead in that series looking to close out the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Major League Baseball going on. NFL storylines, college football storylines are off the charts as well. And not to leave that to the end here, how about the World Cup? 4-1 win over Paraguay last night, and the men get out to a great start. First time they scored that many goals since 1930. We have so much to cover. Guys, do me a favor. Fire the cannons. So let's get into this Brennan Sorsby story, which now has all kinds of tentacles to it. First and foremost, let me say right out of the top here, this kid needs to play. This kid has to play. You're hearing all the outrage by these phony saber rattlers and all these people throughout the country saying that this is bad for college sports. What in God's name did you think was going to happen when you opened up the floodgates and the avalanche was behind, when all of this was going to come out after all the decades of the NCAA pretending that NCAA football and basketball were amateur sports? You created this. Hey, Dan, do you want to have a guy like Brennan Sorsby on your football team? And would you want to play for a guy that was potentially betting against your team? No, that's not the case here, though. You're using Brennan Sorsby as a vehicle for you to have your outrage and your phony-ass outrage on the landscape of college sports now because of nil and transfer portal. All these high and mighty morality cops now need to get a reality check. You created this. You know, Theodore Roosevelt put into play the NCAA back in the day because kids were dying on the football field. So that was the instituting of the NCAA. Well, since that time, the NCAA has been the most destructive thing in college sports. And you know what kids today are doing? They're challenging it. The days of I told you so, and this is what you'll do because I told you so, are now being challenged in court. And the NCAA is getting beat over the head with all of this in what has happened. So you got now a case where this kid went into a court on his own dime, and he ends up getting a judge in Lubbock County, of all places, to rule in his favor so he could play the 26th season. Folks, I know Kirby Holcott very well, and he is a man of integrity. He was the former athletic director at the University of Miami. And Texas Tech AD Kirby Holcott says Brennan Sorsby's availability after his 2-game suspension will depend on his recovery. And he's going through recovery. The problem that you have now is that you have everyone now trying to team up on the guy and Texas Tech by saying, we may not play them. Guys, there's no way in hell this kid should not play. All the decades of the NCAA not paying kids, I said this when I first got into broadcasting. Hey, you know what the NCAA should be doing? Pay a kid that's a freshman $100 a week. Pay a sophomore $200, $300, and so on as you get through grad school. No, they wanted to pretend that it was amateur sports. It's not amateur sports. Not when coaches are making north of $10 million a year. How do you look at that as amateur sports? And now all of a sudden you're mad because the kids now have the vehicle and now have the ability to be able to fight back. Unbelievable. All these morality cops trying to cancel the kid who won a court decision that favored him playing in 26. Kudos to Brennan Sorsby. You deserve to play because this is what the NCAA has created. The kid should play at Texas Tech. And I hope that football team makes it to the 12-team tournament where bigger decisions will have to be made on putting that guy and that team into the postseason. All right. Well, I got to say this here to you about a guy who's now fallen from grace. That is Phil Mickelson. I mean, you know, the media has, behind him for many years, has treated Phil as the golden child, as the guy that was relatable to us. Phil Mickelson was the other side of Tiger Woods. You know, I give Tiger one thing. Tiger's not a good husband. He wasn't, right? Tiger has addiction issues, right? Well, Actually, in the end, Tiger's being more relatable to us as Americans than Phil ever was. No one ever questioned Phil Mickelson and his gambling issues. Like, ever. No one in the media. It's funny, we just got through talking about Brandon Sorsby, and here's Phil Mickelson, who was notoriously one of the biggest gamblers in the history of competitive sports. And no one ever questioned it. How do you know Phil wasn't gagging putts, throwing events? No one ever questioned that. The golf media never said anything about it. And now we get another case here. He's been tossed from his country club in San Diego for allegedly misappropriate conduct with an employee there at the golf course. Phil Mickelson has been a fraud since day one. I mean, we've all known this. When you watch Phil and how he handled himself with Liv, how he handled himself with everything that he's done in his life, Phil's been the biggest fraud in sports. But you know what? The biggest surprise is how the media is responding. Oh my God, I can't believe Phil is that guy. Why wouldn't you believe it? It's because you built this guy up, and now we're watching a man tear himself down. Phil Mickelson has always been this guy. Phil Mickelson will never be an official starter. Think of this, 3-time Masters champion. He's got more green jackets than Tom Watson, and Watson is an official starter at the Augusta National. Phil is a pariah now. Him and Greg Norman are pariahs in the golf world. And Phil has done this self-inflicted to himself. Now you look at Phil and you're like, Phil, the legacy that he built has been absolutely destroyed. And it's all by his doing. I mean, we've known this for a long time that this guy was a creep. Now we're seeing this play out in front of our eyes. At least we know who Tiger is. He's a fallible human being. Phil was a BS artist his entire life, and it's now being exposed. All right. Game 4. I mean, I don't know where else to go here. The greatest comeback in NBA Finals history. 29 points down. You even had many of the celebrities with their jaw on the MSG court after that game, 107-106. I'm watching the game with my daughter, and I told her, I said, if they can get it down to 15 by half, which they did, let's see what happens with the Spurs in the second half. Dude, I got to tell you, Charles Barkley was right. That had to be some of the dumbest coaching and some of the dumbest play in NBA Finals history. You know, it goes to show you a little bit on why the Knicks are a more experienced team. You can see it play out. Down 14, down 12. What did they do? They ended up coming back. And I'll tell you what, the resiliency of that Knicks team was on display. They've been down in a boatload of games. But what's the one thing that we've noticed about that? They went to the second round 2 years ago. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and now they're in the NBA Finals. That's a team that has gone through the progressions, kind of like the old school Chicago Bulls and the Pistons did back in the day. And you know what that's called? Learning how to win. And you're seeing now the Spurs, maybe before the greatness comes. Look, the San Antonio Spurs are going to be in the conversation for NBA championships. Make no mistake about it, okay? Make no mistakes about it. They're going to be. All right. My friends, do me a favor. Check out our great friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in all of America for a reason. You know why? That is because they win. With over $30 billion recovered, Morgan & Morgan is the #1 injury law firm in all of America protecting families like you. I tell you about the family in Pennsylvania that was initially offered $650K. They got nearly $30 million in settlement. How about the family in Florida that was initially offered $350K? They got nearly $12 million in settlement. Go to forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. That's forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. And do me a favor. You tell them Big Sills sent you. We are going to talk with Adam Kaufman and get his take on the incredible Game 4 that we witness next right here on Well, we were just talking, Adam Kaufman and myself here about unbelievable. And I got to start it out with game 4, unbelievable. And Adam, I appreciate you joining us here, man. I mean,
Of course.
how did the Knicks do it in game 4, in your opinion?
Well, it's multifaceted, right? We like to have these conversations. Did the Knicks come back? Did the Spurs blow it? The truth always lies somewhere in the middle. I think that the way San Antonio, Dan, played that second half, and look no further, obviously, than 70-plus points in the first half, 30 points in the second half. Yeah, there's an element of make-miss. I mean, they couldn't miss in the first half and couldn't buy a bucket in the second half, but it goes beyond that. I think just some of the offensive approach was honestly a little reckless on the part of San Antonio. You don't need to keep hoisting threes. You certainly don't need to do it with 15 seconds left on the shot clock and taking it, well behind the 3-point line. You can move the ball around. You got loads of talent on that team. You can look for better shots. You got a 7'4" alien, as we like to say, who's capable of getting to the basket literally whenever he wants. I didn't understand, again, the offensive approach by the Spurs as the comeback was happening. And not to take anything away from the Knicks going out and taking that game. I mean, obviously, it was the biggest finals single game comeback we've seen in NBA history. It was remarkable, almost mystifying to watch. But I think there is a part of it that San Antonio kind of let happen. And that part of it, I don't understand.
Adam, do you agree that learning how to be a champion also has to go through the learning curve? You look at the Knicks. The Knicks had 2 years ago, they were a team that got to the second round. Last year, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and now they're the NBA Finals. And it's kind of, if you go back to the old school teams, like, those Pistons and Bull teams, they had to beat the Celtics.
Yep.
The Pistons. Then the Pistons had to beat, the Bulls had to beat the Pistons. And it kind of went through that, and you're seeing the difference in that play out. I mean, the Knicks have been down as many as 12 to 14 points in other games, and there they are with being resilient and coming back. Is that still Wemby and his young group learning how to win?
So a couple things there. There is something to be said for continuity. And yes, there's been the coaching change with Tom Thibodeau to Mike Brown. And obviously, in terms of the way they play and not running starters into the ground and utilizing a bench and, using Karl Anthony Towns in kind of a point forward way. I mean, Mike Brown is not getting enough credit for what he has done with largely the same roster that Thibodeau had. But at the same time, Tibbs did start it. They're not here where they are without obviously everything that, as you noted, they went through under his regime and that gradual progression. But a lot of these guys have played together for a long time. There's a continuity component that I do think helps teams over the course of time grow, grind, develop confidence in one another. But to your main question, I'm so glad you brought it up because I have been talking about it, I feel like, endlessly for a couple weeks now, even going back to San Antonio playing against Oklahoma City, the defending champs. I wondered in that series, okay, these are two pretty evenly matched teams, two incredibly talented teams. One guy is MVP, the other guy right there in the conversation. There's a lot of youth, albeit inexperience on one side, but a lot of youth on the other side as well. Does San Antonio, as Oklahoma City had to, does San Antonio have to learn from losing? Does it have to experience defeat in order to taste success? Because as you outlined, you go back through history, and there are many examples, but just some. LeBron James was swept in his first NBA Finals. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was swept in his first NBA Finals. Kevin Durant was swept in his first NBA Finals. A lot of, and there are more. A lot of these guys need to experience losing before they can climb the mountain and ascend to their highest levels. And when San Antonio was able to come back from down 3-2, including winning that Game 7 at OKC, I started to wonder, well, a lot of teams don't skip steps. Maybe this one will. Maybe this team doesn't need to experience failure before ultimately getting the highest prize. But now you are seeing a team that, to me, is still, even down 3-1, marginally more talented top to bottom on the roster than the Knicks, but galactically dumber. The Spurs are playing dumb basketball, game after game, giving away opportunity after opportunity. Look no further than obviously its best player, Victor Wembanyama, doing what he did at the end of game 2, throwing the ball off the back of Stephon Castle with an opportunity to win that. The missed free throws with in the final 2 minutes of game 4, among other mental errors in that game. There are so many instances, so many other alternate timelines we could be living in, Dan, where San Antonio is running away with this series, maybe has already won this series, but instead, the Spurs are just giving the Knicks every opportunity to take this thing.
Absolutely here. And, to your point, Jordan didn't win for 7 years. People always forget, in that 63 double overtime game that he put up those points, that Bulls team was swept by the Celtics. I mean, everyone was like, well, he was great in that series. They were absolutely swept. I mean, is it crazy to say this to you here, Adam, that, you mentioned it earlier. So am I right? James Dolan, who I criticized a year ago, making that move by getting rid of Tom Thibodeau and putting Mike Brown in, maybe change the franchise into being a championship franchise by that one move, because you're seeing it playing out right now. Am I wrong to say that?
I think it's nuanced. I think it's a little deeper than that. Like, Mike Brown couldn't do it alone. Obviously, his players have to deliver. You need to see heroics on both ends of the floor from OG Anunoby, who, you could justify putting 2 statues of the guy outside of MSG between the block of De'Aaron Fox and the tip-in off that missed 3 from Jalen Brunson to win the game. Those 2 plays happening, inside 3 real-life minutes of one another. So you still need to deliver. Guys need to perform. Jalen Brunson, who, is perennially in the first-team All-NBA conversation, but I would say is not a top 5 player. He's a top 10 player, but they're just a very balanced, solid roster. I would, when the move happened, and I'm as big a critic as anybody when it comes to James Dolan and this Knicks franchise, quite frankly, I felt that they had reached their ceiling with Tibbs. They needed a new voice. They needed to do something different. They need to play a little bit differently. Now, did I think Mike Brown would have them where they are? No, I didn't think the Knicks were the best team in the Eastern Conference, but they have been eviscerating opponents this postseason, and it's been so much fun to watch.
No doubt. We'll continue more on this crazy series next with Adam Kaufman here on Sports. Okay, so as a longtime Knick fan, I got to tell Adam Kaufman here that when I was a young kid, I was like 9, 8 years old. The Knicks were great. They won the NBA championship 53
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I can't believe where we are now. And now Knick fans are now inundating San Antonio. And now San Antonio is in fear of Knick fans. I don't know, Adam. I'm feeling pretty good about what's going on down there. Now you got the Spurs saying, if you don't live inside of a particular area code, you can't buy Knick tickets. Please give me your take on this one here.
All right, so that part of it, and this courtesy of TMZ as you're looking at on your screen, came out a little earlier today. San Antonio, like Ticketmaster or teams, however you want to frame it, teams through Ticketmaster have the right of refusal, right? They can refuse anybody's business, same as any other company. You can say, we're not going to sell tickets outside of a certain area code or region, and that's fine. Like the Spurs would be, far from the first team to do that. That happens in the postseason constantly for teams that are just trying to fill the stands with their own fans. Like I get that. And by the way, Nick, like let's not cry, oh woe is us, Knicks fans. Who this isn't all Knicks fans, but the loud, the vocal, the visible minority. I mean, talk about a trash fan base, literally beating the crap out of Spurs fans outside Madison Square Garden. Like, you deserve everything coming to you in a negative way, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, New York fans on the whole, say what you will, and Boston fans or Philadelphia fans, but like, there may not be a singular worse fan base in the world than that of New York Knicks fans. It's awful. However, to your point about the story, the part I can't get over is this article noting that there could be voided tickets on Ticketmaster that have already been purchased if it is discovered they were purchased in a certain region, in a certain area code. So they could basically look at it, and I don't even understand how legally this is possible, but they could look at it and say, oh, this could be a Knicks fan. We're going to void the ticket and put it back on the resale market. Well, what if you're a Knicks fan that has hopped a plane and flown to Texas only to discover you don't have a ticket to the game anymore because Ticketmaster voided it? I don't understand, again, the legalities of that, how that could possibly be something that is actually plausible. I don't get that at all. And that on the part of the Spurs is screwed up if they're trying to do that.
I will go down this lane with you on this. I didn't realize celebrating was kicking the crap out of someone else. I mean, to me, I want to have some Coronas, have some good time, eat some food, watch a game. Beating the hell out of somebody at Central Park is not my idea of celebrating.
Unbelievable. And I mean, I was, not that any like Spurs fans are out there following me on Twitter, but when they were up by 20 plus points in game 4 and it looking like it was going to go a certain way, I started tweeting like, Spurs fans, I implore you, I beg of you, if you are at this game wearing a jersey, take that thing off before you go outside, because like somebody was going to die after game 4. If the Knicks, after taking a 2-0 lead in San Antonio, went home hosting their first NBA Finals in more than a quarter century with the chance to win a championship for the first time in more than a half century, drop both those games, one of those in the most maybe embarrassing fashion that we have ever seen, somebody was going to get hurt beyond imagination. I am like, that's the one upside of the Knicks coming back and winning that game.
All right, game 5 tonight. Let's go to the game. Do the Knicks get it done tonight?
It's funny how many people are saying, oh, the extender, Scott Foster, he's going to be the official. Well, what people may not realize is the Knicks are actually 10-0 this year with Scott Foster officiating their games. So the extender mindset may not come to fruition. We'll see. That said, yeah, Dan, I think we're getting a game 6. I think the Spurs, I don't know that I would lay the 5.5. What I would do is play the first quarter line of 1.5, 2.5 on San Antonio. That has been free money. Every game this series, San Antonio is up by double figures in the first quarter. That has been air, as my buddy likes to say. So I would lay it in the first quarter with San Antonio, or if you want to take the juice with the money line, you could do that as well. But full game, I'm not going to be surprised if the Knicks keep it close and cover the 5.5. I still ultimately like San Antonio to win this and force it back to MSG.
30 seconds here. Who has to star in this game, not name Wembanyama for the Spurs?
I mean, De'Aaron Fox could use a couple of good moments to get critics off his back, obviously, but, more Dylan Harper. Not to say he has underachieved. He has been phenomenal. We just need to see more of him. We need to see him in the fourth quarter. We need to see, we just saw Alvarado and Brunson play together for the Knicks for the very first time this entire year, regular season included, and it worked seamlessly. Good for Mike Brown. How about Fox and Harper getting some minutes together?
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Adam. We're going to talk with the legendary Christine Brennan from USA Today next here on the Sports Grid. This is one of my longtime friends, Christine Brennan. You could see her on ABC News. She's obviously a legendary columnist with USA Today. She is a bestseller, New York Times. She joins us right now here, and wow. It's been a long time. We go back all the way to the University of Miami when I was there. So great to have you here. And hey, real quick, before we get to your book, what'd you make of the men last night against Paraguay in the opener of the World Cup?
Dan, it's so good to see you again, and thanks so much for having me. And yeah, you know what? A 4-1 win is a big statement. It's a statement that the pressure is not going to get to this team. Obviously, Paraguay's not great. They're ranked, I think, 41st in the world, and the U.S. is ranked 17th. But still, that's where you could stumble. That's where the pressure could get to a team, but not this team. The U.S. men's national team really looked great, and we'll see moving forward what happens. Clearly, they'll now advance. Pretty much everyone's going to advance if they win a game or two, but they'll move on, and then it gets really interesting. But that was a great start for the U.S.
You know what? Real quick on this before we get to the book on her game, it's about Caitlin Clark here. Don't you agree? A couple years ago, everyone started looking at the NBA, and you started seeing people like Wemby, Joker. You could see all the great European players, and that goes back all the way to Barcelona and what David Stern. Do you think we'll ever get a moment for U.S. men's soccer where that galvanizes American athletes to want to stick with it? Because, Christine, you tell me, don't you think that kids from the ages of 12 to 15, that's where that change from wanting to play soccer to wanting to go and play the other sports? You ever think that'll change?
Yeah, for boys, you've got a great point. Where does soccer lose them? Because you have them. You have every boy and every girl at age 5 and age 6, right? That's where they start. It's with T-ball, obviously some of that, of course, as well. Baseball being a sport American kids have played for over 100 years. But also, of course, soccer now entering the picture over the last, say, 30, 40 years. And, can it trickle up, right? That's the question you're asking me. Not trickle down, but trickle up from that moment. The women, yes, of course, that's Title IX. That's the law signed by Richard Nixon 54 years ago, actually, right now, 54 years, that changed the playing fields of America. And that's why U.S. women's soccer is so dominant, because other countries didn't care about women's sports. We did. And that's why our women's soccer team is light years ahead of most of the others around the world. The men, they're so far behind, right? The catching up is the big part of this question. But yeah, I mean, let's see what happens here. Because we know from the 1980 men's hockey, at that time there was only men's hockey, in the Olympics, and how kids wanted to start playing hockey. We've certainly seen, as you said, 92 Dream Team in Barcelona. I was there at that Olympics covering it. And, that's where the explosion happened around the world. So is it possible, your question is a good one, and I'll answer it with a question. Is it possible that a great result, and when I say a great result, I mean Sweet 16, a round of 16, but I even think quarterfinals, getting to the final 8. If that's, and then it's beyond rarefied air if they get, to the final 4, the U.S. men's team. But if they do, then yes, I think it will have an impact moving forward over the next 20 years.
I want to get to your book here on her game. And I've asked the same question to people, and they seemingly just can't give me the answer here. Why is it so difficult for the WNBA to have Caitlin Clark as the face of this league when they've got the golden goose right in front of them? Why is it so difficult for that league to understand this?
Dan, I address this in the book. You know me as a journalist. I address everything and talk about these issues. And the book is very much up to date, but it was her first season. The paperback includes the second season. But now here we are in year 3 of the Caitlin Clark era. And even my saying that, if I put that on Twitter or if I say that, people get mad at me, the Caitlin Clark era. I mean, the lack of understanding of the magnitude of the moment is astounding to me. The numbers are undeniable. Facts are facts. And when Caitlin Clark disappeared last year due to injury, and of course that was so unusual. She'd never been injured except one game in high school. And then to have her miss all but 13 games last year. When she disappeared, Dan, more than half the TV audience also disappeared with her. That is unprecedented. Tiger Woods didn't have that. Michael Jordan didn't have that when he went to baseball or when he retired. That's how big a deal Caitlin Clark is to the WNBA. And it is understandable. There are lots of factors. It is a 74% Black league that never got the attention that it deserved from the mainstream sports media. And I know this because I would cover it. I was covering the 96 Atlanta Olympics. 99, I was sideline reporter and analyst for Lifetime TV's coverage of about, 7, 8 WNBA games back then. So I cared, and I was covering it. And for the Washington Post and then USA Today, absolutely covered the issues involving the WNBA. I've been there the whole time. And I'd get laughed at if I was on radio shows, not by hosts like you, but by callers. Oh, why are you covering women's basketball? Guys, saying they're just rolling around on the floor. It's just jump balls. And I would defend it back in the 90s. And those men would just kind of laugh and hang up. All right. Well, those guys or their sons are now the ones who are buying the number 22 jerseys and wearing them not only to the game, but to the grocery store and the gas station. That's the sea change. And so while we understand that a Black league, a majority Black league, you and I have never spent a second as a Black person. I say this on my book tour all the time for the book, that it is, we don't know. But what we do know is this: the spotlight shining on Caitlin Clark is now shining on all these players, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Mitchell in Indiana, so many others who never got the attention they deserved. And they're getting it now because Caitlin Clark is there, the attention magnet, drawing people in, drawing men who never would have cared about women's basketball. And I know this because I see them on my book tour in Iowa and Indiana and Maryland and Chicago, everywhere. They tell me this as they're buying 5 books for their granddaughters. These men care about Caitlin Clark and rearrange their evenings to watch her games on TV. That's such a breakthrough moment. And the WNBA doesn't need to hate that. They can love that because all these other players are making more money. They got charter flights because of Caitlin Clark, the new collective bargaining agreement in large part because of the TV interest and the sponsor interest drawn in by Caitlin Clark. And those are the facts. And I detail all of that in the book. And yet still there seem to be some very hurt feelings, which enough of that. These are strong women. They can handle it. And let's hope that this younger generation, they appreciate Caitlin Clark much more than the older players who will age out over the next few years.
Could this just possibly be, Christine? And I'm going to put this like, you know me, I'm as blunt as I can be. It's a white girl from Iowa that's in a predominant black sport that's getting all the eyeballs on her to help their sport. And it's just professional jealousy.
I deal with that. I don't use the word jealousy per se in the book. What I do is I tell anecdotes and stories to show that. And it was Diana Taurasi, too, and Brianna Stewart. I mean, the UConn, I think the UConn people are shocked that it's not a UConn player, that the one is an Iowa player. And, so you've got that kind of old entrenched view, too, of the women's game. But in the book, I talk to a lot of people. I talked to Dr. Harry Edwards, the man who was behind the black power suit at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. You and many others might disagree with that moment, but listen to Dr. Harry Edwards, a black man, great civil rights leader, fighting cancer, still hanging in there. I love him. He's a friend. He loves Caitlin Clark. And he said the WNBA failed the players. He said, you help them out, not because they're damsels in distress, because we've never seen anything like this before, what you just said. And so the reality is, of course, there's jealousy or hurt feelings. Have Zoom calls. Prepare for it. Those are the things the WNBA could have done that I say they failed to do. And even more important, Dr. Harry Edwards says that they failed to do. Nonetheless, Caitlin's still
Christine,
terrific.
We're going to continue this. I love Dr. Edwards. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. I love him. We are going to talk more about On Her Game. Caitlin Clark, with the great Christine Brennan next, right here on Sports.
I know you didn't. Talk!
I'm innocent. Got the wrong guy. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Okay, it was me. I did it.
Bringing an owl to an interrogation? That's a power move.
Every time. Yeah.
Hiring America's largest injury law firm for your injury? That's also a power move. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
How much do you think tanking is hurting the NBA right now, too? And what we're seeing, like we saw with that Jazz and Orlando game a week ago, how much do you think that's hurting the game?
I can't wait until professional sports in the United States adopts a European model, especially like a Premier League model, and they start doing relegation. The day you start doing relegation, everything changes. Everything will change.
Outspoken with Dan Sileo, only on Sports Grid.
More of our conversation with the great Christine Brennan on her game really chronicles the first year of Caitlin Clark in the WNBA and what she has brought. By the way, I will say this to you, Christine. I did not watch women's basketball until Caitlin Clark. I did not watch WNBA basketball. I have never seen a WNBA basketball game until she got into this league. How important is she compared to, say, somebody like a Larry Bird, bringing the white viewers to the sport? And what people look at that conversation as sometimes, Christine, they look at that conversation as, why you go down the race line? Well, race sells. Take a look at the news industry right now and how much they try selling that. How much and how important is that to bring the fringe white customer into the building?
I would say men in general. I've certainly, white men. I've also met black men and women too, white or black, who said the same thing that you just said. Never watched a WNBA game, probably never watched much of women's college basketball, unless it was your school or something. But more watched college because of the affiliation with the college. So the TV ratings are higher for the women's college game than the women's pro game. But I have this, because I've been touring the country with my book, the people I meet are so fascinating. And they tell me this over and over again. I never cared. I never watched. And now, as I said, they tell me they rearrange their evenings around Caitlin Clark's game. And it is men and it is white men. But I bumped into a black couple going to a game in Indiana. Said they spent all this money to drive in from wherever they were, I think Wisconsin somewhere. And this is the first time they'd ever been to a game. So it is across racial lines, but your point is a good one. What I've seen from some of the reporters on the beat on the WNBA, as I chronicle in the book, there's some tweets that were like, angry that there were new fans, and I couldn't believe what I saw. Having covered sports for over 40 years. As a journalist, you want your beat to be bigger. You want more people to read you, watch you, care about it, right? That's the whole goal. I mean, in addition to being a great journalist and covering whatever you're covering and being fair and honest and truthful. And what I kept seeing was people wanting to keep the small things small, Dan. And it's just unbelievable. Like, does Roger Goodell say to the Taylor Swift girls, the millions and millions of Taylor Swift fans, the tweens and whatever, no, don't watch the NFL. We don't want you. Well, that is the message that I have seen. I've actually witnessed people talking about it, and I've reported on it in general, and it is absolutely absurd. You want to grow a sport. Caitlin Clark is the one. Paige Beckers, you often hear people talk about Paige Beckers, and Paige is a great basketball player, and Paige was Caitlin before Caitlin. They are a couple months apart in age, grew up 4-hour drive away, and Paige Beckers was the number one recruit coming out of high school from Minneapolis suburbs. And Caitlin Clark was the number 4 recruit coming out of high school from the Des Moines suburbs. Okay. So, but then Paige got injured. Caitlin obviously becomes Caitlin. And of course, it's the logo threes. She's an entertainer. It's the high wire act. But now you hear people say, oh, Caitlin and Paige, or Caitlin and Angel. Angel Reese could not sell out the United Center without Caitlin Clark. In Chicago, when she played in Chicago, people were not buying tickets to watch Angel in Chicago. Caitlin coming into town was the reason. Same with Paige Beckers. Dan, you will not believe this. Paige Beckers with Dallas cannot sell out a 6,251 seat arena. 20 games last year, only 7 were sold out. 6,251 seat arena. Caitlin, of course, 17,000 plus in Indiana, plus on the road, moving to the 20,000 seat arenas. Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers are not even in the same solar system. And when people realize this, when the facts, just the basic facts come out, or when people realize them, I think the WNBA will be better off when they realize that Caitlin Clark is the one and is bringing the eyeballs that they should be so pleased to have.
Christine, I'm going to ask you a pretty tough question here. And to me, it's a whole different type of media now covering the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark. There was a scenario a couple months ago where a man asked a question about a relationship with one of the WNBA players. Now, to me, I hear that question being asked to men all the time. And I hear that, don't you think the media also has to learn? And I think the WNBA also has to learn, if you're going to be covered like a big time sport, you're going to get stupid questions asked to you, just like the NFL and Major League Baseball and NBA guys do. Do you think they're going through that process themselves on how they're covering this sport? Because the WNBA is now a mainstream sport and people are covering it. Now you're getting different eyeballs covering it, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, I've said this many times, Dan, the Indiana Fever are like a men's major league sport. And it's the first women's team sport to be that. And that's why Caitlin Clark is the most important, famous, popular, crucial, significant women's team sport athlete we have ever seen. And only tennis. Only Serena and Billie Jean King and Venus and others even come close to the magnitude of Caitlin Clark. That's how big a deal she is. So, you know, that question in Dallas actually was a legit question because the way it was Kevin Sherrington asked it was totally legit. Have you talked to other players? It was AZ Fudd, who of course is the number one draft pick for Dallas, and Paige Beckers, and they have said that they are in a relationship. Question was, have you talked to other teams and other players who've been on the same team and how you deal with that? Totally legit. And AZ Fudd is a super smart person, as is Paige Beckers, and they can answer it. But then the PR person got involved. We're not allowing that. Again, this is a league that's just not ready for prime time. It's often amateur hour, and it pains me to say this because, you know, as much as I've covered men's sports more than women's sports over the years, football and Tiger Woods, et cetera, I've also covered a ton of women's sports and cared very much about it. And so to see their inability to handle these moments, there's a great quote in the book from Annie Costabile, who's with The Athletic now, who says, is this a sport or is this a charity? In other words, is it being coddled? And it's time to stop coddling it. Caitlin Clark's the real deal. And they need to do a better job of understanding the magnitude of it and the media that comes. You're going to get those questions and answer them because they can answer them because these are smart, terrific young women. Absolutely. And you are a maverick when it comes to covering women's sports. You are a maverick when it comes to sports, period. You're one of my dear friends, and I appreciate you more than you know. On her game, Caitlin Clark, make sure you go to Amazon and get this. Christine Brennan, thank you so much for this. I can't thank you enough. We will see you soon. Sileo says next, right here on Sports Grid.
Hey, you know the phrase untradeable? Well, how about this here? So Patrick Mahomes just got a brand new contract extension, and they reworked the deal here in Kansas City for a guy who's coming off of a knee injury. And what did they do? His contract is now valued at $529 million. They gave him an additional $150 million, which now pays him an annual salary of $63 million. Do you know what he had fallen out of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in pro football? You're looking at a guy here that took the Kansas City Chiefs 7 straight years to the AFC Championship, and inside that time frame went to 5 Super Bowls, won 3 of them, and has 3 most valuable player awards in that game. And you're talking about a generational player. Look, Brady is the man when it comes to all the numbers when you see 35 postseason victories. How about what Mahomes is doing? He's a generational talent. Look, if you're going to start a football player and you're going to put a football player together and you're going to make one guy that you want to have build a team around, that player's Mahomes. He covers all issues. Have you ever seen anything like this? So you get rid of Tyreek Hill, who 3 years ago was voted by the players as the best player in the National Football League. And then they get rid of him, and the Chiefs go on to win 2 Super Bowls with dudes named Juju Smith-Schuster. He elevates people around him. He doesn't have to have Devontae Smith or an A.J. Brown in his huddle. He doesn't have to have all these superstar wide receivers like Jamar Chase. That is the value of Patrick Mahomes. Look at what he does for Brett Veach, the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs. You could build your football team and build a roster around a quarterback who's generational because he covers your weaknesses and he covers some of the places on your football team that are not strong. You lose an O-lineman, Mahomes gets rid of the ball quick. You don't have a star wide receiver or an aging tight end like Travis Swift. You could sit there and get around all of that. I say Travis Swift because I'm hearing he's changing his name when it comes to the wedding coming up this summer. So I'm assuming it's not Travis Kelce any longer. It's now officially Travis Swift. But you get my drift here. We're talking about a football player that covers all issues. We have never seen a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes in the history of the National Football League when it comes to skill set. Now, will he fulfill his destiny? And that is to do the things that Tom Brady did by winning 7 NFL Super Bowls. We shall see. Still a lot of football to be played. And with a guy like Andy Reid and Brett Veach, the general manager, Kansas City, I'm assuming, are going to bounce right back and be in the mix to contend for another Super Bowl. You know, Jimmy Johnson told me this about 3 years ago about Mahomes. He's the most untradeable guy I've ever seen play in the National Football League. If you were to put Patrick Mahomes on the open market right now, what would you get back in return? You just gave the guy $63 million annually. You gave him a contract of $500 million because of his skill set coming off of an injury. And you're looking at him saying, I don't have any issues. Mahomes is a magician, and he really is. He's a guy that you build your franchise around. John Elway's another player that you could go back in NFL history, or if you want to go back with one of the greatest gunslingers in the history of the league in Dan Marino. But I've never seen a guy with a combination of Steve Young's wheels and Joe Montana, his brain, and also the arm and the actions that you see here with Dan Marino. Patrick Mahomes is he's a different dude. We've never seen a guy like Mahomes in the history of the National Football League. He is by far the most untradeable player I've ever seen. And Kansas City saw that and gave him the additional $150 million, and they gave it almost all in guarantees. There's been no quarterback in NFL history that has done the things that he has done with less. Now, you go and you look at Brady, Edelman, Amendola. I get it. You're talking about fulfilling your destiny now. Jimmy Johnson, as I said, told us, you could not put that guy on the open market right now and not get 5 first-round draft choices back for this player. And Kansas City knows what they have in Patrick Mahomes. Best quarterback we have seen. And again, it goes back to the line. Jack Nicklaus is the most accomplished, like Brady, the most accomplished player at quarterback. The most gifted golfer is Woods. The most gifted player that we've seen is Mahomes. Make no mistake about it. Patrick Mahomes will have the Kansas City Chiefs back in a contention site for them to be able to go on and win another NFL championship. Can you imagine if he goes on and ties the things and does the things that Tom Brady will do and has done, I should say, winning those 7 NFL championships and 35 playoff victories and every single record under the sun. We are going to talk with a man who was honored 2 weeks ago in New York, the legendary Bobby Valentine. Next, here on Sports Grid.